I understand how difficult it is for the audience to listen to the last speaker in a day, especially since he was announced as a lecture giver. I'm not going to give a lecture, I should give a talk, right? So that's going to make your lives easier, and mine as well. I would like to share in this talk, I'd like to share some of my experience and also some of information on the Marie Curie grants. The fancy title of my lecture or talk given by the organizers, actually invented by a very important person I shall refer to later, was how to get a Marie Curie grant. So I'm going to tell you how to get a Marie Curie grant. And I'll be speaking from experience. I was fortunate enough, I was honored to receive a Marie Curie grant in 2012. And I spent a year as a Marie Curie Fellow at Lund University, Sweden, working with Barbara Torp-Ispleva, who's the chair of this cost action, on a project called the Europeanization of the Holocaust memory in Eastern Europe. So I'll be talking a little about how I was applying for this grant, what I found difficult, what I found easy. But let me first correct myself. It's no longer a Marie Curie grant. Here you can see my search from Google, which I have just made. Google makes things simpler than they actually are. It is still Marie Curie grants, as it appears here, but it's actually a Marie Skłodowska-Curie grant, right? I should stress it as a Pole, right? Marie Skłodowska was a Polish woman who married a Frenchman, Monsieur Curie, and she became Marie Skłodowska-Curie, or Marie Curie for short. She was a Polish physicist, natural scientist, physicist and chemist working in France with her husband, Monsieur Curie. She became world famous, Nobel Prize winner and everything. She was a proper transcultural woman, having been Polish prima vota, right, and then becoming French. And she was transcultural. So she's a proper person for our audience in this conference. And the grants which the EU has funded for past several years to go places to do research are named after her. These are individual grants. These are not group or collaborative research grants. Many of us are familiar with the Horizon 2020 calls for various proposals for collaborative grants, where you have to combine a consortium of a number of universities from a number of countries, and there has to be a balance between north and south, east and west, women and men and everyone, right? This does not apply to the EU. Sorry, this does apply to the EU. This does not apply to the Marie Curie or Marie Skłodowska-Curie grants. In the Marie Curie Skłodowska grants, it's you, your ideas, and your application, right? It's an individual grant. However, it is not a grant to do research only in your country, in your institution. So it is not to work in your home institution where you are currently at. So if you are a doctoral student at a Lithuanian university, if you apply for a Marie Curie grant, you'll have to go out of your institution, right? And this is the main thing about these grants. They are to encourage mobility. Marie Skłodowska-Curie was a mobile person. She was born in Warsaw, where she attended the secondary school, and then she went to Paris to study, right? So that was the mobility. And this is to encourage mobility, the grants named after her. And the next thing is, so it's individual and it's about mobility. So it's not like the typical Horizon 2020 or framework program number 765 or whatever, collaborative projects. Having said that it's individual grants, and it's you and your application, there is one important thing about the Marie Curie grants which you have to bear in mind. That's the receiving institution which you have to, the host institution, right? That's the technical, the host institution which you have to pick for yourself. You have to know where you want to go. And the second thing about it is you have to know who you want to work with. Because you do not only choose a foreign university or another institution to work at in the future, but you also choose a person in this institution who would be your scientific supervisor. That's the technical term, the supervisor. It's almost like with the PhDs, right? And it is very important to choose a proper supervisor, meaning a person who's proper for your topic, and a person also who's renowned enough. Then when it comes to evaluation of your proposal, it's also the person and the institution that are evaluated. It's not only your proposal. I shall talk about it later. Right? So it's important to go to a renowned university to work with a renowned scholar as your supervisor. Because when you choose a unrenowned place somewhere and an unrenowned person, you might have a very brilliant idea for your research, even the best in the panel, but this will not grant you a scholarship because the overall evaluation will be biased negatively because of your institution which you chose and the person who you wanted to work with. Now, how relevant it is to the audience in this room? Now, I think it is very relevant to everyone in this room. Because Marie Skłodowska-Curie grants are meant for experienced researchers. Every one of us here in this room is an experienced researcher. And I'm not teasing you, right? I understand that most of us in this room work towards their PhDs. But what is the definition of an experienced researcher, according to the formal rules of those grants, is A, it's a person who has got a PhD. How many of us have got a PhD? 2, 3, 4, yeah. So you qualify. Yeah? And also those who who completed a degree which allows them to work towards a PhD at least 4 years before the application deadline. Yeah? If you, yeah, this might be either, and this should be a degree which makes you eligible for a PhD in your country or in the hosting country, right? And mind it, because some countries, like the UK, there it's enough to have a PA, for example at Oxford. Right? In Oxford you don't have to have an MA to start a DPhil, how they call PhD, right? Doctor Philosophia, right? So, this is very important because a lot of people actually perceive Marie Curie grants as those which are typical postdoc grants. They are, they can be postdoctoral grants, and they are actually ideal for postdocs. But they can also be for predocs, right? For those who are working towards a PhD, provided that you receive your MA or PA, whichever makes you eligible to work towards the PhD, 4 years, at least 4 years before. So the 4 year is the 4 years is the amount of experience which you have to have in research. So if you are in the 5th year of the PhD studies, or if you did 2 MAs, which is quite often the case, at least in Poland, and your first MA was, say, 5 or 7 years ago, and now you are in the 3rd year of PhD studies, or 2nd year, you still qualify. And you also qualify if you are longer than 4 years, right? I was much longer than 4 years when I started, right? And there is no aging policy here, right? There is no ageism involved. There are not many aged people in this room, other than myself. So, you know, there is no such thing as an upper limit of age, right? Which is untypical for a lot of Polish grants, for example. In Poland, if you are elder than 35 years of age, you do not qualify for grants for young researchers, which is rubbish to me. It should basically be sued. The government of Poland should be sued in the European Court of Justice for ageism, because that's illegal in the EU, to discriminate against age, right? So the EU does not discriminate. They didn't discriminate me, and I got a Marie Curie grant as a present for my 50th birthday.
Good for you.
Okay, so then another thing I should say. Let me get my glasses so that I see things easier. Even though there is no age limit, lower or upper, and there is only this 4-year experience period, even though the grants are ideal for postdocs, but can be also applied for by pre-docs, there is a very strong focus in those grants on achieving the scientific maturity, whatever that means, right? In the grant applications, in the grant information materials, you will read a lot about the goal of these, you know, trainings of these researchers. Everything which you are going to do is going to be this is going to be the achievement of your scientific maturity, whatever that means, right? And yeah, I will not expand on this. Read it for yourselves, right? In technical terms, in many systems, in the Polish system, for example, is the habilitation, right? The what's the French equivalent of the German habilitation? Habilitation, yeah, précisément. So, do you have habilitation in Lithuania?
We used to have.
Yeah.
Used to have. Now it's sort of old-fashioned thing.
Old-fashioned. Now it's no longer old-fashioned in Poland, unfortunately. Yeah, but that's one of the ways of defining maturity, right? Maturity is also defined as the ability to lead an independent project and a group of scholars, right? With a group of scholars who work under your supervision, right? So anyway, it's also habilitation, because then you can supervise PhDs. So whatever that means in whatever context, the EU is very flexible on that, right? Now, the fellowships are subdivided into European global career restart and reintegration. And I will not discuss the career restart and reintegration in any more detail than just saying that reintegration is for those who have worked outside of Europe. And Europe here is understood as the EU member states and associated countries, which includes Ukraine and Switzerland, but does not include Belarus, for example, right? Or Russia, right? So if you work in the States for, say, 7 years and you want to return to Europe, you may apply for a reintegration grant. Career restart is when you had leave, a paternity leave, a maternity or whatever, paternity leave, yeah? Yeah. Or if you work outside of academia. Right? If you work in business and you want to return to academia, you apply for this career restart thing. And the other two are European and global. In the global, you have to be a citizen of one of the EU member states or one of the associated countries. So Ukrainians can apply, for example, right? But not the Belarusians. Or you have to be a long-term resident, and there is a definition of it in this. And then you can go anywhere outside of the EU or associated countries. Right? So you can go to the US, and I personally know a scholar from Warsaw who went for 2 years to the US for Marie Curie to work at Princeton. But the most typical of the Marie Skłodowska-Curie grants are the European grants, and that's to go to an institution within the EU, to one of the member state institutions, or to one of the associated countries' institutions. So technically you can go to Montenegro if you want, right? Because Montenegro is associated. Or you can go and work in Ukraine. And of course you can work in any of the 28 EU member states. And what is very important is that this is for everyone. You don't have to be an EU citizen, a citizen of one of the EU member states. So Israelis can apply for a Marie Curie grant, right?
They do.
Yes, they do. And they are very successful. For the European ones, though, right? Because that's to come to Europe, right? Ukrainians can, right? Unfortunately not Belarusians, unless they have got a Lithuanian passport as well, right? So let me talk about the duration now. The duration, and I'm going to talk about the European and the global ones. The global ones, you can go, you can apply for a grant for 24 through 36 months, but this includes a 12-year compulsory placement in a European institution, right? So you can go to the States for up to 2 years, or to Singapore, or wherever, right? But then you have to return to Europe and work in a European institution for 12 years. Now what is fascinating and what I like very much about these Marie Skłodowska-Curie grants, sorry?
You said 12 years?
Months, no. I would like sorry, this is my wishful thinking. See, I spent 12 months in Sweden and I wanted it to be 12 years or more. Yeah, apparently everyone who's come to Sweden would like to stay there forever. I got plenty of anecdotes to tell about this. Yes, this is 24 through 36 months, of course, right? Months. Between 2 and 3 years. And the last year should be spent in Europe. The European grants, right, are between 12 to 24 months. And you choose an institution where you want to work. Now, and this is a very positive thing about these grants. They are very empowering, right? You apply, you choose a place to go. They have to accept you though beforehand, right? They have to write a kind of a letter that they will receive you if in case you get this grant. And this has to be signed by your supervisor, right? So you have to find a professor, it doesn't have to be a professor, a person there who would sign that he or she would be your supervisor and this institution would employ you. And you will become a hero because you will bring money and the EU money to this institution to employ you. So this is what is very empowering about it. You do not compete for the domestic resources of this institution. They will not hate you, at least before all this. Right? There will be other reasons to hate you, for them to hate you, to resent you, to envy you, or things like that, but not that. Okay? Okay. Yeah, let me now talk about money. Okay? Gentlemen don't talk about money. But I'm not a gentleman, at least for the time being, right? You should be aware that you are applying for a pretty decent chunk of money. The money which is going to be allocated to you as a researcher is 3,650 euros per month for your living expenses, and this is gross, right? You have to pay they will deduce social security contributions, they would deduce taxes, and you would get a net amount which varies from country to country, right? And also, this can be more than 4,650 if you go to an expensive country. When I went to Sweden, Sweden is one of the most expensive countries considered, right? They added some 27 or whatever % on top of this. If you decide to go to Poland, which is not as expensive to live in as Sweden is, this 4,650 would be reduced by 20%, right? And that's based upon the purchasing power parity, the costs of living in a country. And this is just, right? There are some EU grants which are not just. For example, in the Horizon 2020 collaborative grants, you get paid your home country salary, even though you work on the same topic as your peers outside, right? And this is very unjust. It was not so in the framework program number 7, 6, 5, etc., but it is so in Horizon 2020. Marie Curie is part of the Horizon 2020 program, but in this case it is just. If you go to an expensive country, you get more money for living expenses, right? And this is number 1. I got 2, 3, 4, 5, yeah? This is the beginning, right? About money. There's plenty to talk about money in this case. Then you receive a mobility allowance, because you move from wherever you're settled, and if you want to return, you see, for example, to spend holidays with your extended family, or if you want to look after your house which you left there, or whatever, you get 600 euros per month, which is also adjusted according to the country. So in actual fact, you get 5,250 euros gross, right? And then you got a family allowance, which is not adjusted according to the country you go to. It's a flat 500 euro. So in actual fact, the gross amount which you are to receive is almost 6,000 euro, which is quite a lot of money, isn't it? And that's not all, right? Because then you also are entitled to spend up to 800 euros per month for various training conference activities. Yeah? So if there is a nice conference going on in Washington, D.C., in an expensive hotel, and with an extortionate fees, as all the Americans can organize conferences, then you can fly, not first class, right? But you can pay the fee, you can pay the hotel, because the conference is in this hotel, and it's, you know, pretty understandable that you have to be in this expensive hotel, and you get a per diem, you know, to go to conference dinners, and it's 800 euros per month. When I calculated this, I figured out that I would have to be away at least a week every month to spend this money. Right? Which I didn't fancy, because everyone fancies Sweden. Yeah, but there are various ways of spending this money. You can buy yourself a very expensive computer, right? But then you have to leave this computer in the institution who was hosting you, because it's theirs, right, technically. Or you can go for an expensive training in some very sophisticated software, right? Or you can use this money in some other ways. You can buy books, again, but books will remain with this institution where you are employed. Okay. And the last bit about money is, there is some bit of money for the hosting institution. There is a flat amount of 650 euros per month for the management and overhead costs of this institution. So they get something too. They do not get much, you get the most, right? Okay, so that's about money. Let us now talk about how to get this money, right? The main thing about Mali Curie, Mali Skłodowska-Curie, I should be a proper Pole, is that you are applying for a training through research project. And that's one word, training through research. So you have to design a research proposal, and that's the most important. You have to have an idea of, a novel, groundbreaking research project. But then you have to write it in such a way that you will have to prove that your stay in this institution would also learn you a lot of things. Right? You will learn how to work in a multinational environment, for example, or you will learn how to operate some new apparatus, or you will learn how to conduct research in a multidisciplinary framework. Right? These sort of things matter. And there are a lot of hints in the guidebook which the European Research Agency produced for the candidates. Right? So you will be not left alone to invent what shall I learn when I go to Sweden, right? Or England, or wherever. But this is important. It's not only to find new things out, to discover the new things, it's also to learn, to develop. And it's not also academic skills which matter. There are also so-called transferable skills which matter a lot. And this can be, for example, the ability to write research proposals for collaborative research projects, right? This sort of stuff. Or an ability to manage a network, right? You go to a place to a supervisor which is in charge of the 7th or 6th or whatever number of an international collaborative project, and you will work with her and you will learn how to do it. Yeah? That's the transferable skills. And there are lots of hints about it in the application guidelines for the candidates. My experience was that I was working in I decided to apply for a project which was going to join two fields of research which I pursued before. I did European studies. I was much interested in how Poland and other Central and East European countries were integrating into the EU, first in association and then in being candidate countries and then through accession. And then I also researched, I'm a sociologist, so I researched public opinion on that, and I wrote articles, and that was my first field. Right? And then my second field, which I started when the first one was already quite developed, was Holocaust memory research. I studied the memory of Auschwitz in Poland, and then I got interested in how Auschwitz is perceived in other countries, and the Holocaust as such, and how Holocaust memory developed. And in my research proposal, I decided to combine the two. Right? I wanted to look whether there was a Europeanization of Holocaust memory, and if there was, because I sensed there was, what it was like and why. Right? And that was my research project. Okay? And I decided to choose Lund University, their Center for European Studies, which is not very much centered on EU studies, right? And it's very cultural oriented, very much humanities, many of you would know. And I knew of Barbara Torkwisleva. I didn't know her personally, right? I knew personally one of her collaborators, one of her colleagues. But I wrote to her. She's Polish by origin. She's now living in Sweden for many years. She's a Swede as well. But I emailed her and she said, why not? We'll be most delighted. to receive you. And then she gave me some formal, because she has to input some formal things when it comes to the application procedure online, right? That's the very end of the process. And while writing this proposal, I decided to get as much of her experience and her team experience, that these were the training things, right? And transferable skills. Barbara has had this network, right? She actually started this network when I was applying. She was successful in getting this cost grant at the moment I was applying.